Not sure what to make of these mysterious bones that they had found, the two explorers contacted a fellow caver and geologist, Pedro Bashoff, who knew just the person to ask. And that person is Lee Berger. Now, Lee is Joe Montana, the Oprah Winfrey, the Paul McCartney, the Barack Obama, the Babe Ruth, the Willie Mays, the Mick Jagger of paleontology. And when you are all those things, they put you on the cover of the Rolling Stones. No, just kidding. They put you on the cover of Scientific America, Science Magazine, Time Magazine, and many other scientific periodicals. All this for a discovery that Lee made. Wait a minute, back it up. Did I say that Lee made a discovery? Actually, in August 2008, Lee's 9-year-old son, Matthew, discovered bones dating back nearly 2 million years. Now we've got our five guys together. The next chapter of this story has two completely different versions that contradict each other. I'm going to tell you both versions, and you can select which one you want to believe. Now, in order to go any further with extracting these bones, which remember are locked behind a 7.5-inch narrow cave, Lee needed support from his sponsor, National Geographic. He wasn't going to get that millions of dollars without very good evidence. So in version one of the story, they took Pedro's laptop. Pedro stayed outside, and the two skinny guys went back down, snapped some photographs with the computer, and took those up to Lee. Now, in truth, they tried that. Now, here's version two. That did not work. It was not of the quality they needed. There was only one man in all of South Africa, or I should say, only one person in all of South Africa trained in paleontology by the best, skinny enough to get through a 7.5-inch gap, and an expert on using computers and cameras. And that was Lee's then 14-year-old son, Matthew. So the five gentlemen go back to the cave. The two, Rick and Steve, and now joined by Matthew, go into the dark. Lee sees his child disappear into the darkness. He waits an hour. He waits 2 hours. Now he's starting to get a little bit concerned. What has he done? Is he ever going to see his child again? After 2.5 hours, Matthew's face pops out with a great big grin and an excellent quality photograph of the bones on his digital camera. That's immediately followed by, or in a few hours, followed by a phone call, which is in America, 3:30 in the morning, to the vice president of National Geographic. So the two explorers, Rick and Steve, contact a fellow cave explorer and geologist, Pedro Bashoff, who knew exactly the person to ask. And the person to ask was Lee Berger. Now, Lee, you may not know, is the Mick Jagger, the Oprah Winfrey, the Babe Ruth, the Joe Montana, the Paul McCartney of paleontology. And when you're at that pinnacle, they put your picture on the cover of the Rolling Stone. Now, actually, they put your picture, your work on the cover of Scientific America, Science Magazine, Time Magazine, and many scientific periodicals, all because of a discovery that Lee had made. Wait a minute. Did I say that Lee had made a discovery? hold on, back off, back up. In August 2008, Lee's 9-year-old son, Matthew Berger, discovered bones that were nearly 2 million years old. And this has led to Lee's success and career. So now we have got our group of 5 men assembled. They believe there are valuable bones down in that cave, which is protected by being a 7.5-inch gap. Lee obviously knows he needs to get a team together, but he needs the financial support for that. And he can't go any further without better photographic evidence. Now, this chapter of the story has 2 completely different versions. I'm going to tell you both. You can decide which one to believe. In version 1, they pick up a laptop from Lee, and the team goes back down to the cave. They squeeze back in, they snap a couple of photos, and up they go and contact National Geographic. In version 2, they come to the realization that there is only one person in South Africa that can get through that 7.5-inch gap, that's been trained by the best paleontologist in the world and is an expert at photography and computers. And that is Lee's 14-year-old son, Matthew. So Lee sends his 14-year-old with the other 2 cave explorers into the dark. Down they go. Lee waits an hour. Not a sound. Lee waits 2 hours. Now he's beginning to wonder if he's perhaps made a mistake. Is he ever going to see his son again? After 2.5 hours, his son pops up out of the entrance with a display on his camera showing an excellent photograph. They take that photograph, they email it over to National Geographic. They call the vice president of National Geographic at 3:30 in the morning. He says, that's great, go for it. The next step is Lee contacts social media and requests help. This is the actual Facebook post that Lee made. In summary, it says that he needs experienced excavators. The person must be skinny, preferably small. Successful candidates cannot be claustrophobic. They have to be cavers and hold a relevant master's degree. 60 people. Oh, they have to come to Johannesburg immediately and accept a blind mission for no pay. 60 people applied. They chose 6. Now, I want you to think about, if you're a PhD candidate, you're probably somewhere between $60,000 and $160,000 in debt. Now, a lot of that is probably underwritten by the Bank of Mom. So just imagine that conversation when you say, I'm going to take off to Africa. I'll be 60 feet underground for a couple of weeks. Oh, by the way, it's for no pay. Rick and Steve were not sure what to make of the mysterious bones that they had discovered, so they contacted a fellow caver and geologist, Pedro Boshoff. Pedro knew the perfect person to ask. Just so happened that Pedro knew Lee Berger. Lee Berger is the Joe Montana, the Oprah Winfrey, the Babe Ruth, the Willie Mays, the Paul McCartney, the Barack Obama of paleontology. When you're that famous, they put your picture on the cover of the Rolling Stones. I'm just kidding. They put your picture on the cover of, they put your work on the cover of Scientific America, Science Magazine, Time Magazine, and many other professional periodicals. And this was all because of a discovery that Lee had made in 2008. Wait a minute, back off. Did I say Lee made a discovery? No, no, no. In 2008, Lee's 9-year-old son, Matthew Berger, discovered bones nearly 2 million years old. Now we've got our team of 5 assembled. And Lee believes there must be something down in that cave protected by a 7.5-inch filter or gap, but he can't get the support he needs without better evidence. Now, there's 2 contradicting versions of what happens next. I'm going to tell you both versions, and you decide which one to believe. In the first version of the story, Lee gives them a laptop, sends them back to the cave. Steve and Rick take some pictures, bring it back up, and Lee forwards that over by email to the United States. In the second version of the story, it's realized that there is only one person in South Africa trained by the foremost authority on paleontology who can fit through that 7.5-inch gap. It happens to be an expert on digital cameras and computers. And that person is Lee's 14-year-old son. So he sends his 14-year-old son into the pitch black cave. Down he goes with the 2 other explorers. Lee waits an hour. No sound, no reply, no news whatsoever. At the 2-hour mark, he starts to wonder if he might have made a mistake. Finally, after 2.5 hours, his son pops up, shows the display on the camera. He's got excellent photos. These are forwarded to the United States, to the vice president of National Geographic. He's called at 3:30 in the morning and says, looks like you got something good here. Set it up. The next step is Lee puts together a social media, reaches out on social media. This is the actual Facebook page, the actual Facebook post that he made. I'm going to summarize it. He's experienced excavators. The person must be skinny and preferably small. Successful candidates cannot be claustrophobic. They have to be cavers. They have to hold a relevant master's degree or doctorate. They have to come to Johannesburg immediately, accept a blind mission for no pay. Nearly 60 people applied. Berger chose 6. I want you to remember that most PhD candidates are somewhere between $60,000 and $180,000 in debt. And a lot of this is backed by the Bank of Mom. So I want to imagine the conversation that goes on when they say, oh, I'm going to go work in Africa, 60 feet underground for no pay for a couple of weeks, and I got to be there immediately. Once again, the bones were discovered on September 13th. The social media post happened on Sunday, October 6th. And on Sunday, November 10th, 2013, the team was assembled. This is the Rising Star expedition. These are called the underground astronauts. You notice that they're all female, they're all petite, they're all pretty small. Rick and Steve were not sure what to make of the mysterious bones, so they contacted a fellow caver and geologist, named Pedro Bashoff. And Pedro knew just who to ask. And just who to ask was Lee Berger. If you don't know Lee is the Mick Jagger, the Oprah Winfrey, the Mickey Mantle, the Babe Ruth, the Joe Montana, the Paul McCartney of paleontology. And when you're that much of the top dog, they put your picture on the cover of the Rolling Stone. Just kidding. They feature your work on the cover of Scientific America, Science Magazine, Time Magazine, and many other professional periodicals. And this is all from discoveries that Lee made in 2008. Wait a minute, back up, back up. Did I say that Lee made this discovery? In truth, Lee's 9-year-old son, Matthew, in 2008, discovered bones dating back nearly 2 million years ago. So now we have our team. Now we've got our 5 gentlemen that know something about the bones. Lee knows they're in that cave and they're protected by a 7.5-inch gap, and he needs a team to go explore. But he's not going to get the funding and backing unless he's got very good evidence to request help. Now, there's 2 completely different versions of this chapter that I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you both, and you can decide which one to believe. In the first version, Lee hands Rick and Steve a laptop. They go down, they snap some pictures, they forward those up to the United States. In the second version, they come to realize that there's only one person available in South Africa, trained by the best paleontologists in the world, who is able to fit through a 7.5-inch gap and is an expert on digital photography and computers. And that is Lee's son, Matthew. So Lee sends his son with the 2 other cave explorers into the pitch dark, and he goes down, down, down. Lee waits an hour. He doesn't hear a sound or any feedback from the team. At 2 hours, he's starting to think he really might have made a big mistake. He's worried he's ever going to see his son again. Finally, at 2.5 hours, his son pops up out of the cave with a great big grin and excellent shots on his digital camera. These are forwarded over to the US of A, to National Geographic. They call the vice president of National Geographic 3:30 in the morning on the East Coast time, and they get approval and funding for a team. Lee's next step is to start a social media campaign. This is his actual Facebook post that he made requesting help. I'm going to summarize it for you. He's asking for experienced paleontologists, excavators. The person must be skinny,